Hey, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Talking with Coach Troy. Today, my special guest is a guy named Todd Wiley. Todd and I go way back as fellow competitors back in the, early 90s, right? In triathlon out east, Pennsylvania, Maryland rivalry to some degree, right? Anyway, I got a lot of respect for Todd, really awesome athlete and a great coach as well. So I want to get him today to talk a little bit about his background and also his philosophy of training and what he's doing now in his athletic life. So Todd, thanks for jumping on here with me.
No, I appreciate it. And it's a real honor to jump on here and catch up and talk to it. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, glad you did. So tell us a little bit about your background, in terms of your development as an athlete, because you were one of the top age group athletes on the East Coast at a time when it was incredibly competitive. That Mid-Atlantic region was just stacked with talent. Tell like where you came from in that progression to be in that area.
Yeah. So, early on in my life, I learned at a young age, I was terrible. Anything with a ball, I was terrible. Absolutely no coordination at all. So straight line sports were for me. My older brother was a swimmer. So my parents said, we're not going to drive you around anywhere. So we're going to throw you into swimming also. So at a very young age, I was a swimmer and then progressed into running in middle school. But back when I was in middle school, we weren't allowed to run the mile. So I really focused on the 400, 800, which is more, definitely more sprinting than anything. So once I got into high school, the cross country coach was recruiting me. And I said, there's no way I'm going to run a 5K. It's way too long and I just didn't want it. So I didn't go out to cross country until my junior year in high school and progressed pretty quickly with running. Got recruited to run Division II, the cross state or not even cross state rivalry of your alma mater at Kutztown. So you were at Westchester, but I ran at Kutztown, but Division II, but focused more on the 800 or recruited as an 800 miler. Ended up 10,000 cross country All-American. So going back to high school, I always wanted to do triathlons, but in the mid 80s. There weren't a lot of triathlons per se, let alone my parents had no idea what a triathlon was. So they just bought me a bike and said, bike. So after I graduated from college, that's when I got into triathlons, like you said, in the early 90s. So first triathlon was early 90s. And then, just jumping around to, nationals, back then it was probably Tri-Fed nationals or USAT nationals now, and then worlds, progressed into, I really love the duathlon aspect of it. I think, it's funny because I was an age group swimmer, but, for some reason, it just never correlated to open water swimming. So really loved the duathlon aspect of it and had success in duathlons back in the, when 90s. I mean, duathlons was almost just as big, maybe not as big as triathlons, but almost just as big as triathlons. So
I remember you as a duathlete because your run was so strong. That was really a great, I think, event format for you. But you're right, duathlon back in those days was sort of like your training race for your triathlon. Yeah. But I tell you, I had so much respect for really top duathletes. I felt like they were some of the best athletes out there. I mean, to be able to come off of, what was it, 5K, 30K, 5K was a traditional distance, right? Something along those lines. Come off that first 5K, some people be coming off that in 15 minutes, 15, 30, and then hit that bike and hitting it hard right away.
Oh, absolutely. Some of the guys, we can go down the list of names and, if you weren't running 15 minutes off the bike, then you weren't going to be racing. But, even so back then when I was, I ended up, triathlete of the year in 98, but, then started, racing as an elite, or, professional card or whatever you want to call it. But uh, it was more draft legal back then, and there weren't many long course racing, and draft legal stuff just wasn't for me. So that's when I started focusing, or a lot of us focused on the long course stuff because we weren't front pack or whatever you want to call it swimmers.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Well, I remember you and I raced against each other a lot at Eagle Man. That was sort of like the premier, East.
Yeah, I would always wait for you to go blowing by me on the bike. So
Well, I'd always be looking behind me, waiting for you to catch me on the run.
right.
Lots of good memories out there on that course. Lots of suffering out there on that course as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and a great course, obviously
Oh,
you
yeah.
being from that area, just an awesome race. So
Yeah, no, for sure. Well, definitely one of the more iconic events out there in the Mid-Atlantic. If you were a triathlete,
absolutely.
you did the Eagle Man. So, you had a really successful career, age group, got your pro card. I know that you went into long course racing, went to Kona several times as well. Tell us about your Kona experiences.
Yeah. Well, I was, again, I don't think I ever figured out the long course stuff. Half Ironman stuff. I felt like I could really race it, but the Ironman stuff, I always felt like, the funny thing is, being a runner, I always felt like I'd never figured out that marathon and the long course stuff. But the interesting things when I, went to Kona as a pro, I got the women's spot. So it would roll through the women, and there would be a spot left, and then they would give it to the men. That's how I ended up always getting spots. So
Yeah.
I got, I was always lucky to be able to get out there and everything. So it's a lot different than now. There's no way I would be able to qualify now, but back then it would just roll through, and there was a handful of spots, but there weren't as many pros that were racing, so it was a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um,
What was your favorite part of the Ironman course, or
favorite part?
maybe least
Oh,
favorite part?
the run was always a struggle for me, trying to figure it out. But the run's always a special part. But each one is, you suffer differently in each one. But the goal with the triathlon was, but especially long distance stuff, was try to balance the three. If you could balance the three, you're going to be a really good triathlete. I didn't ever want to be known as a runner. I didn't ever want to be like, relying on my run to, get me to the place I wanted to be at. My goal was always to balance the three.
Yeah, be solid in all three, and that gets you to the finish line a little faster. No, I get that.
Right, right.
So you became a coach, right? And you started working with athletes, and basically a passion thing, because can't come up in the sport, you love it. So many people get so connected to it, they want to help others. So tell us a little bit about your coaching business and your philosophy around that.
Yeah, well, the interesting thing with coaching, going back and thinking about it, I started coaching when I was in high school. I was coaching swimming then. Started coaching at my college when I graduated for a year or so with track and cross country. Then I coached at a high school for 5 years. So I was, I think I always had that passion of coaching. And then in I would say about 1999, a friend of mine was putting on, or was a coordinator of organization called Team and Training out of Philadelphia, and he was starting the triathlon group up out of Philadelphia, and gave me a call, and he said, "Would you want to be the coach for that?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So 15 years later, after that, I was still coaching for Team and Training. One thing just led to the next, and working with some athletes here and there. And I was very lucky. My main role was stay-at-home dad. So coaching was a easy progression for me as a stay-at-home dad, raising my kids, or helping raising my kids, and helping athletes out when I could. So
Right.
it turned into, if you want to call it a business, but it's more of a hobby and more of a passion for me than anything else, helping athletes out. So yeah, it ended up, I put on a small race in the area, do some swim clinics in the area, do a camp. I'd actually end up, up in Lake Placid.
Yeah.
I would actually be leaving on Thursday for that camp. So
Yeah.
I'll miss that. But I've been doing that for I've been lucky enough to be doing that out the Olympic Training Center up there
Oh, cool.
uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
for the last 7 years or so.
That's very cool. That's one of my
Yeah.
favorite places for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's great there. So tell us about your philosophy on training. Are you a quality guy? Are you a volume guy? How do you balance that with your athletes?
For me, it's the consistency. The consistency I find with the athletes is the key, and then if you throw in some quality stuff in there, not never really huge volume. I was never a huge volume type of guy, or coach with that philosophy. So, again, it depends on the person, but and it depends on what you're getting or going to it or getting ready for. The more consistent you are, the fitter you're going to get. The fitter you're going to get, obviously it's going to relate to racing well. So,
Yeah.
and then throw in some quality sessions or specific training sessions in there.
Right.
Um,
What about as you get older? We're both. I'm 50. I'm assuming we're about the same age. So
2 weeks.
all
Two
right.
weeks, I'll be 50. Yeah.
Well, happy birthday before your
Yeah.
birthday.
Thanks.
So what about
We don't look it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All that training, right?
That's right.
When you do work with older athletes, though, is there a difference in the way you train them? Are you incorporating different modalities, or what's your philosophy around?
Yeah, for sure. And even so with me, I don't have a degree in exercise physiology or exercise science or anything. So a lot of stuff I do with myself is kind of trial and error. And it's not saying that the way I train athletes also, but it's more or less like, like I said, consistency. Throw in strength training in there, throw in some stretching in there. Is that going to help you? Now foam rolling is such a huge thing. Is that going to help the athletes out? So I think with me, with trial and error and experimentation with myself and the things I've learned, not only great people like you with coaching and other coaches I've gotten opportunities to work with, what we find works better or better for, or maybe not best for, older athletes, but figuring out what works well with them. But, and peaks and valleys with their own training. You can't be so consistent anymore. You can't stress the body out continually, because something's going to give. So you do need rest in there, especially as you get older, and, I find that I can't throw in, I'm training probably just as much now as I used to be able, but I have to take a lot more rest periods, or down training time,
Right.
rest periods in there. So
Yeah. No, I hear you. It's like your recovery's slower. You can't handle, well, for me at least, can't handle the same volume. No way. Even intensity, I think, becomes a little bit more challenging. It's all, everything just slows down. But the recovery.
The intensity I find, volume wise, I feel like I could take or older people can take the volume wise if they slow it down. The goal is to slow it down. But as soon as you throw intensity in there, your body's going to start breaking down.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's the old philosophy of I want to get faster, so I'm going to train harder. Well, it's not necessarily the case.
At this point, if we just stay the same speed, we're actually winning because everything.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So
exactly.
you transitioned from multi-sport to ultra running. So what's that like? I mean, are you putting in 100-mile weeks now, or what's your
well, interesting. So I have a brother who's an ultra marathoner, and for years he always tried to get me into ultra marathons. I'm like, there's no way. It goes back to my high school days. Like, there's no way I'm going to run a 5K. But so it's interesting how you progress and the mind work. So, not saying I was transitioning out of triathlons, but just, we always constantly look for new things and new challenges and everything. So, so I said, what the heck, might as well give it a try. And, the interesting thing is the first 50 miler I did, it's kind of like going into your first Ironman. It's kind of like, all right, the unknown, I just want to finish it. And then afterwards you're like, yeah, that sucked. But, I kind of want to do it again. So did a couple more, and yeah, the surprising thing is, and I even ran through college. I mean, I've thrown down a couple 100-mile weeks, and just to see how the body can take. And I think it goes back to saying, one, you have to listen to your body, so really pay attention to your body. But there's some days I'm running really, really easy, and for me that was the key to being able to have my body handle those longer volumes at this point.
Yeah. Well, I follow you on Strava, so I get to see some of your runs. I'm like, man, that guy's putting in some serious volume. I don't know if my knees can handle that anymore.
I'm lucky, I'm lucky. So again, I listen to but if I do an ultra, you won't see me for a couple weeks on Strava or anything like that. So again, that's the key, and the Northeast winter, I'll take the winter off and stay inside. So
No, I hear you. So what's your feeling around endurance sports? Here we are, COVID-19 pandemic, and the world's starting to not get back to normal, but going back to work to some degree. But you hear a lot about upcoming events, and they're getting canceled. Ironman's getting canceled. I think Kona's postponed until next year. And so, what's your thoughts about it? Do you think we're going to be coming back and racing anytime soon? And
I personally, I don't think this year. I don't think there's going to be a whole heck of a lot. I've seen that some ultra marathons are going on. I think that's a little bit different than a triathlon, but I just can't see hanging out with thousands of people in a corral getting ready for a swim start. Yeah. It's very unfortunate, but you have to look at the big picture too. If you look at the big picture and you're healthy, you fit, keep training. I tell the athletes I work with, it's like, why give up? Have this. Let's set a different type of challenge for yourself. Whether it's there's a lot of virtual challenges out there, so something like that, but just something to keep yourself going. So,
well, to your point earlier, consistency is so important when it comes to training, and you can't give yourself a gap of, say, I'm just taking off for now and I'll come back and be just as strong. It doesn't work that way, especially as you get older. You need to have that consistency.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, and it doesn't have to be, with Lake Placid being in the Northeast, and that being canceled, I have a handful of athletes that are racing in Lake Placid. And then, so last week it was, canceled or postponed or whatever. And, the athletes I have, I'm like, let's reduce the volume, but let's not just shut it all down. Right. Totally. And set a different goal, whether it's a 100-mile ride or, a virtual challenge or something later in the year or something. So just set a different goal so you can keep things going.
Keep that momentum. Yeah, makes sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. So how does somebody find you if they want you to coach them?
Oh, geez. That's something that I was never good at, is marketing myself or anything. But T Wiley Sports is my website. So,
TWileySports.com.
Yeah, TWileySports.com is my website. But
and you're based in what part of PA? You're outside of Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, about an hour outside of Philadelphia, northeast of Philadelphia in Bucks County. So, yeah.
Great. All right. Well, listen, man, thanks a lot for being on my podcast. Really do appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's always great catching up with you, Troy. And it's we go, like you said, we go way back. But I remember the days of throwing them down with you out on the course. So it was a lot of fun.
The good old days when things were a lot different in the sport. We can always be like an old timer and say, yeah, I remember when the days were different and better. But maybe they weren't.
I think I remember the Seaside Heights triathlon that you did, and you kept going on the turnaround, and there's no way I was going to yell at you to turn around.
Oh, I remember that. That was a duathlon. I do.
I don't know if they turned into a duathlon because they canceled the swim or something, but I was trying to chase you down, and I was going to let you know to turn around, but I said, forget it.
That's right. I just kept running. I remember that now. Oh, wow.
I think I won that one and you got second or something like that, but only because you went off course.
That's funny. Oh, thanks for that memory. All right. Well, Todd.
That's probably the only time I ever beat you. So.
Oh, I don't know, man. You push me all the time. Well, everyone, thanks for signing on, and make sure that you sign on to more of our interviews where I interview really interesting people who have really cool things to say and really excellent backgrounds like Todd. So until next time, train safe and train smart.